Cosmic Disclosure with David Wilcock and Corey Goode, SSP Testimonials with William Tompkins. This is on Out of Mind. The episode of Cosmic Disclosures included a two-part special consisting of some of the most amazing testimony given since Corey Goode first disclosed the inner operations of the secret space program. And this episode consisted of the life experiences of retired Navy Colonel William Tompkins. You can find a lot of his interviews and explanations on YouTube. William Tompkins worked as an engineer designing U.S. Navy aircraft carriers, and he claims that he also did the same for U.S. Navy spaceships. Now, Tompkins served in the U.S. Navy for decades on end. He was first noticed for his ability to sketch and to build detailed models of Navy ships with lifelike accuracy. He was drafted at an early age, went to work for Lockheed Martin, and would later work for Douglas Air Company. At Douglas, Tompkins was placed in a think tank which had the duty of reverse engineering ET spacecraft. His skill at ship design was used for the purpose of designing new spacecraft, which would later be used within the secret space program, and these would be the ships which the Dark Fleet would later use to travel outside of the solar system. And the episode starts off with some pretty amazing testimony from William Tompkins. WD is William Tompkins, DW is David Wilcock, and CG is Corey Goode. So the SP Testimonials with William Tompkins showed transcript and commentary. Tompkins, WT. So I went to work then at Douglas, and I'm a draftsman for 2 weeks, and my section chief started through my background, and of course it says all of the stuff that I had done in the Navy. So he puts me in this think tank, and there's where we get to the first think tank. It's inside of Douglas, in a walled-off area, and there's 200 guys in it, and we investigate every aspect of extraterrestrial, military, commercial, and whatever. And I was assigned to design for the Navy about 16 or 18 different classes of the U.S. Navy battle group ships, which did not exist. And these were, the larger ones, were from 1 kilometer to 6 kilometers. These ships fly in space. They're spacecraft carriers. I designed U.S. Navy spacecraft carriers, which finally got built back in the late 1970s up in Utah, underneath the ground. And you've seen the pictures of U.S. Navy spaceships, Solar Warden. So Solar Warden came out of a think tank inside of engineering at Douglas, and a whole lot of other stuff came out. DW. All right, this is David Wilcock, and you're watching Cosmic Disclosure. I'm here with Corey Goode, and in today's presentation, we have a bombshell for you. We're going to be interviewing the veteran insider of the secret space program, William Tompkins. I've had numerous conversations with him. He's actually 94 years old. He's still with us, and this testimony is unbelievable. It validates so many aspects that Corey and others insiders have spoken, and I've spoken to, have been saying. People tell us, oh, you have no proof, you have no evidence. Well, here's a guy who comes out of the World War II era, and his testimony is just going to rock your world. I want to give you a little background, biographical information on him to set this up. So check this out. Wikipedia, Long Beach Naval Shipyard. William was first noticed by the United States Navy when he was just a young boy. He was living near Long Beach, California at the time, and his father would take William and his brother down every weekend to see many naval ships that were parked in the harbor there at Long Beach. William Tompkins was a good artist, and he was really good at building models. And soon he started creating scale models of the ships he was visiting. The Navy began taking notice of this brilliant young boy and his models because they were so close to the real thing. But it was when young Bill Tompkins began adding top secret parts to these model ships that the higher brass took real notice of him. He was then taken to the Navy and was brought into the think tank during World War II, and after the war, he went to work for Douglas Aircraft, which is now the defense contractor McDonnell Douglas. If you want more information on William Tompkins' fascinating background, I encourage you to go to the biographical introduction of William Tompkins that we have here on Gaia. William Tompkins became part of a secret think tank that began to design the ships, the craft, the buildings, and everything they would need for the secret base program. But we want this to start out with a bang, so we're going to begin with joining William Tompkins as he tells us of his many decades-long journey through the secret space program. He's going to start out our conversation by telling us how the U.S. Navy began discovering some of the things that the Germans had been inventing since the early 20th century. And Germans in space. WT, it's 1942, the war's on, Rico Botta, his hobby is sending these Navy operatives into Germany. They've been going all over Germany and they're staggering at what they've found. They found that Hitler and the SS made an agreement with reptilian extraterrestrials, and they found hundreds of different types of advanced weapons being built. These include 60-foot and 250-foot, 500-foot UFOs, round vehicles, UFOs. They built some of these out of chromoly steel that would weigh tons and tons and tons. They had developed, or they had been given, electromagnetic anti-gravitational propulsion by the reptilians. And then you have the secret Australian anti-gravity program linked to 1966 flying saucer landings. The agreement turned out that they were to develop a parallel space navy that the reptilians had and operated through the galaxy, with the reptilians taking over planets, enslaving people on the planets. But what they had already accomplished was really strange. They have all these UFOs, different types of propulsions that were unbelievable, laser weapon systems, unbelievable stuff all over the country, Germany and the occupied areas. They had massive underground production facilities that they were using. They developed for regular arms wastes like tanks and places built Navy ships and all this kind of stuff. Most of it was underground, so they started expanding those facilities, and they put 11 of these UFO-shaped vehicles in production. So the operatives are trying to explain to us, and the admiral would back off and say, "Slow down, I don't believe you." And that went on, and then the captains would say the same thing. The operatives were nice guys, and they knew they were going to get the questions when they got back into the admiral's office, and they knew that nobody was going to believe what they said. So fortunately, the admiral had a typist in there, and the admiral's aide was not in there. He was not even cleared to be in there. And one or two of the captains, the admiral and myself, and we were the only ones, the only people that this information was given to by the operatives. I want to step back to my job in the Navy there, working for Admiral Rico Botta. We talked about my mission, not my job, my mission. It's documented, It's written in the Secretary of Navy, Forrestal, who became the #1 guy in the military. And then he, like several other people, included our president at the time, were talking to a lot of other people. And so he was supposed to have had a mental breakdown, so they took him to the hospital where they're in Washington at the top floor and pushed him out the window. So that's the guy that wrote Admiral Rico Botta's mission, which my mission came from his. And that was the level of this information in the United States, and now no other country but Germany knew about the extraterrestrials. Nobody did. Now, as this starts to unveil the reality of what Germany was doing, it was like the war was going to be over, period. They're going to take the whole planet, and they could do it in 5 minutes. They even had trained a group of soldiers, the entire battalion of them, who were cloned. They had cloned a whole battle group of soldiers. They sent them out front, and they were done away with. And the Russians, they were killing the Russians unbelievably. So it's not just the material, but the advanced medical systems, longer lives, the size and the magnitude of what was taking place was unbelievable to everybody that got involved in the program. Now, there's possible evidence, says here, of Nazi cloning program in Brazil. Now, the SS found out that people could live longer, so there was another big, massive program in pieces brought back by the Navy operatives plotted it on the table in front of Admiral Rico Botta. And of course, that ended up with about 24 packages because of the different magnitudes of living longer. And I guess if you ask the questions of the Nordics, their comparable lifespans are 1,400 to 2,200 years. But they looked exactly like us. There's a study that we did later on the TRW on advanced life systems, extended life, and that program is down now to within less than 2 years. It's going to be available to some people on this planet. The way it works, I'm very involved with it. Essentially, you take 4 aspirins over 6 months, pop them, or you get 4 shots, you immediately change. Everything is nicer. Everything is nicer. And what you do is you revert back to the girl is to 21, the guy's to 29, and it takes a while for you to do this. You then stay at that time for essentially a couple of thousand years. Your brain then, which collectively we're only using 2.2% of our brain, I don't care what they're telling us, we're only using 2.2%. You get a minimum of 400% capability over what you normally had. And now what this does is this allows you to contribute. Age regression used in secret space programs confirmed as scientifically feasible. You go to work for the company here, 20 years, they give you the watch, and you've got a couple, 3 years later on, and you're out of the picture. So you didn't contribute very long, all right? Now you're living 2,000 years, you can contribute, and you also can have fun for 2,000 years, and you don't change age, you stay there. 5 of the top medical research groups like Scripps, right here in San Diego, are involved in this, and there's hundreds of companies involved in this. There's a whole lot out there that's being removed from our part of our life, and we are in this position where everything that we've been taught, whether it's in the university or in medical or in technical field, even mathematics, is baloney. Yet because we have allowed reptilians to put the stuff in our minds, it removes our capability to operate or learn our entire history. All the way back thousands of years has been being controlled. We now know this, and it's not something that we think could happen. We now know this, so if you look at countries, you're looking at the Roman times, and you see, if you take in parallel these events back with that, the Romans were being mind controlled. They had the elite group, they had all of the army, and they also had slaves, and that's where we are now. We're just finding out about this, and we need to fix it. Note, it boggles the mind just how many data points have been corroborated between the testimony of Tompkins and Goode. It's difficult to wrap my head around the fact that so much of what Goode first shared was so vigorously ridiculed, demonized, dismissed as ridiculous, and yet now we have this parallel story of Tompkins which paints a picture of the conception of the secret space program with virtual identical precision. So what are the chances? The only possibility I can see is that the testimonies of Goode, Dr. Michael Salla, Michael Ralph, and Randy Kramer are based upon fact. To my knowledge, none of these people met until they came forward as whistleblowers. To take such a bold step is a risk on multiple levels. Not only has it been proven to be potentially hazardous to the individual who speaks out, but it can shake the foundations of all of those who believe themselves to have a grasp of the truth of the situation. And the episode continues with Goode and David Wilcock. DW. All right, well, as you just saw, that's a very dense amount of information that we just got. It's unbelievable. If you've been paying close attention to the show before, you've seen other episodes, and then you're already aware of how much validation we've been getting there. So here to discuss more about these details with me is Goode. Corey, welcome to the show. CG, thank you. DW. So first of all, we have Tompkins starting out working from 1942 to 46, actually debriefing these 29 spies that were embedded in Nazi Germany a total of 1,200 times. And he said that they had experienced this German secret space program firsthand, that the Germans had cut a deal with reptilians. So just to start with that, how did you feel when someone comes forward and validates such a key part of your testimony in the show? CG, Well, I have to say it's gratifying, especially after knowing that he, I was told, has no idea who I am, couldn't pick me out of a crowd. So, this is leading me to believe that this program is what fed some of the data to these smart glass pads. So I was most likely reading the results of his briefings. DW. Now, when you're talking about somebody like Secretary James Forrestal being pushed out of the floor of a building in the course of setting up his work, is that a common thing? Is there a short life expectancy of people that get to these programs? Corey Goode. Well, yes, a lot of it depends on whether you toe the line or not. If you don't toe the line, then things, they're not afraid to take out a president, let alone a former. Was he head of the Navy? DW, yeah, he was Secretary of Defense. CG, Secretary of Defense? Yeah. CG, wow, since to them this secret is higher than the nuclear bomb, any other secret, then they think any of this type of retaliation on people that open their mouths or don't toe the line is justified. DW, now he said that Admiral Rico Bota's aide wasn't even cleared to have access to this information. That might strike some people a little strangely. Do you think that there are other precedents for that in your experience? CG, I saw that kind of thing happen all the time. You would be in a briefing and you'd give a pre-briefing, and then they would have 5-10 people have to get up and leave the room because they were not cleared for the rest of the information. So I've seen that kind of thing happen a lot of times. DW, he also said that Admiral Rico Bota was constantly calling BS about the testimony that he was hearing, that it was just so fantastic sounding, so hard to believe. And he said that the Germans were the only people, the only country at the time that really knew about extraterrestrials back then. So did you find that this wow factor was a fairly consistent element, that people just have a really hard time processing this when they first encounter this information? CG, oh yeah, absolutely. Case in point, when I came out talking about being regressed 20 years, serving a 20-year space program, I felt the same way. People were this is just too incredible to entertain. DW, now he also discussed in the short clip that we just saw, Nordics. And if you read his book, he's describing intensive encounters that he's had later with Nordics, and we're going to have some interview footage on that later on. But was it interesting to you as well to hear him mention that aspect of things? CG, yes, because the Germans were in contact and working hard alongside the reptilians, as he stated, but there were Nordic groups involved as well that different elements of the German space program were in contact with. DW, right, now he mentioned that the Germans, with the help of, he just calls them the reptilians, he didn't say Draco, so we'll just use that term. The Germans with the reptilians were creating a space navy, and that their goal was to not just worry about conquering the Earth, but also to use material that the personnel of Nazi Germany to create an interplanetary, interstellar conquering army. What was your feeling when you heard about this? CG, I was a little bit shocked, knowing that he does not know anything about my testimony, and I reported the genesis of what we're calling the Dark Fleet for a while, and this is exactly the genesis. They're working mainly outside of the solar system, working alongside reptilians for defending territory and conquering new territory. That was their mandate. DW, it seems hard for me, just personally, to understand why people on Earth would give a darn about conquering other worlds if they only found out those other worlds existed a few years ago. Do you think that this is more of just something the Draco talked them into as part of the deal? CG, it was part of the deal. DW, to get to the technology? CG, that was part of the deal. DW, because why would the Germans care about other planets? They don't know anything about this. They'd have no background in it. CG, well, if you were 1930, 40 era, had that consciousness and perception of the world, and you were told that all of this stuff was out there, that might change. You might become very eager to get out there and see it. And if you're from a conquering mentality force, hey, all the more better for the reptilians and their goals. DW, he also said that the Nordics would live between 1,400 years, 2,200 years, and now that's over 10 times, maybe even 20 times normal human lifespan. Some people are going to have some trouble with that. Have you seen any information that corroborates with that deal? CG, yeah, we're talking like 2 or 3 times the age of Methuselah. DW, right. CG. So yeah, I mean, that's exactly pretty common out there in the cosmos. Since they've gotten to a certain technology place of development, the human body, is extremely easy to manipulate, heal, and all kinds of stuff medically. So the bodies of these non-terrestrials, I would assume, is similar. And if they can travel across space, they've definitely looked into and figured out their own genome and how to manipulate it. DW. Now, another thing that might be contentious for some people that they're going to have trouble believing is the testimony that the Germans were actually cloning soldiers and that clones were being used to combat in combat. And what's your response in that aspect? CG, well, I hadn't, but it's news to me, that part. But I do know that there was cloning going on later that I read about, and the Germans were doing this in America, starting in underground bases, in these so-called NBC or biological facilities. DW. And speaking of these underground facilities, he said that the Germans were building these discs in several of them, and he also said there were several different prototypes that would go up to 500 feet wide. Is that consistent with what you've heard? CG, our shipping yards or whatever, when we were building our earlier craft, it was done in the same manner, underground. That I was briefed about. They were in huge underground caves, and they were building them in sections, putting them together, and then flying them out into space. DW, is the craft being as wide as 500 feet consistent with what you've heard? CG, much wider. DW, okay, and what about the chromoly steel that he mentioned? CG, that I had heard. The ships were incredibly dense and heavy because they were using that era of material science, but they started developing material science, and within 20 years or so they were having craft very similar to non-terrestrial craft that we would run across, to where you could pick it up with one hand and rock it. DW, wow. CG, I don't think it was quite there, but they developed quite a bit in their material science to make them lighter. But the weight really doesn't matter when you have the torsion or gravity canceling technology. It could weigh 1,000 tons, and once they turn it on, it doesn't matter. DW, sure. Now he also said something about that again people may have trouble with, especially the more skeptical inclined. And that would be, he said that within 2 years we could have a life extension system released to certain individuals in which you would take 4 pills or 4 shots over the course of 6 months. He's saying that some pretty outrageous stuff. He's saying that you're going to get 400% IQ boost, and that your age reverts to about 29, and that you then stay like that for 2,000 years. And everything becomes better, and you feel better, your life is just enhanced. Does a technology like that exist that you're aware of? CG, yes. And as I've stated in the past, some of the technology in some form was used on me at the end of the 20 years, when they age regressed me all the way back to 16, 17 years old. DW, but you're not staying at 16, 17 years old. CG, no. DW, and you're not living for 2,000 years, obviously. CG, right? But this is more of a maintenance kind of thing. If I was getting these chemicals on a semi-regular basis, most likely that would occur. And that's one of the things about these programs. They want to make people reliant on who's running the programs to come back for more shots, pills, and whatever. DW, well, I'll tell you, Corey, one of the things about this concerns me, and I want to put this on camera because I think it's very important, is that the space program insider, Jacob, he describes to me that they, the cabal, are going to try to get humanity to accept shots that will extend lifespan, but he told me that there were going to be nanities in it, and that we would actually become merged with AI. So do you think that that could be how this works? CG, that's most likely a type scenario. You know, these are not really good-hearted people, so if they've kept this technology hidden for 80 years or whatever, why are they all of a sudden going to become all benevolent and give out life extension? There's always a catch to these people, so there's probably some sort of Trojan horse in the shots, just like most of the shots now. DW, do you know of any way that this could work that does not involve AI and nanites? CG, well, yes, it obviously worked for me without nanites. DW, okay. CG, I think to get me so quickly down to the age that they needed, they did a little bit different method. I wasn't taking pills, so they did it intravenously. DW, right. CG, but I only witnessed a pharmaceutical application to what happened at the end of my service. I passed out and all that afterwards. The fact that he's talking about telomere manipulation and that type of pharmaceutical innovation to help people extend their life, that's pretty good details that I hadn't had before. DW, let me ask you this. Is there a way that if this technology does come out, that we could test it for nanites? Or could we shock it somehow with electricity or something so that if there were nanites in it, that they would not be able to work? CG, yeah, both of those are true. They could test them for nanites or just not to have to worry about it. They could take all of the samples through and hit it with electric charge. That's unless introducing electricity is going to change something in the chemical. DW, so we don't necessarily have a xenophobic attitude about this. If there's a technology that's benevolent that comes out from the good guys, can we potentially use it? But we just have to have certain safeguards and caveats in place. CG, right? And unless mortality was staring me in the face, I would probably sit back and let a few other people try it first. DW, all right, so now that we're going to do, what we're going to do is we're going to show you another clip that gets into some of the more interesting aspects of Maria Orsic and the whole Nordic aspect of what Tompkins' testimony has to offer us. Maria Orsic and UFOs, William Tompkins, WT. So we had a young girl, Nordic, just outside of Germany. Some people talked to her and they said, you are now involved in a new program and you're going to have great support in this program. She had developed with, I think she had 8 girls. They were continually talking to telepathically to go and design spaceships. The little blonde actually built them. Eventually 2 of those got over here in Area 51, but Germany found out about the blonde, took over her and stopped everything, and then got to the point where there was some sort of pressuring program by the SS to control that original group. Now several times they did work together, but Hitler allowed them to operate independently of the whole SS program. The whole development. So we had 2 developments going on in Germany. The girls didn't want their vehicles to be used for anything but travel. They were afraid that somebody would get a hold of it, and they used it for military, which of course what they got. But the girls finally ended up in Antarctica in the large facilities. In fact, the reptilians had 3 massive caverns. They let German use 2 small ones, but when they're talking about small, it's like as big as California. So there's cities in both extraterrestrial caverns, manufacturing everything that you would need on a planet. So then Hitler's group did the same thing. 4 years before the war was over, it was decided that the war could possibly be lost, but if we win it, we still need to get out of the area because the Allies are going to bomb us off the earth, and there won't be anything left here left for us. So they decided to move everything to Antarctica. Admiral Byrd, they were going down there and they were going to take out the whole thing in a week. The top people in every area of the Navy, best aircraft, best ships, best weapons, everything. And 5 weeks later, things didn't look very good. When we got down there, they decided they were going to have one thrust from the west side of Antarctica and then the opposite side coming into both of them towards the center of the continent. And so before we even got all the guys around, and I'm talking about big 4-engine flying boats, okay? And ships, battleships, destroyers, and submarines, and you name it. Before they got there, these very large, they were 100-foot diameter saucers, came up out of the ocean and took down everything. Now there's a misnomer on some documentations about the photographs of some of the UFOs. Many of the close-ups give you a real clear picture of the cross on them, and that's partially incorrect, and that information that has been released was that not all of the vehicles came up out from the German side to take out ours, but from the large caverns adjacent to them. Unmarked UFOs and unmarked cigar shapes came up, which then it was a joint venture by the extraterrestrials that lived there, operating from there, and built the vehicles that went to the moon and Mars and all those other places, but we lost that war. Note, on the subject of Maria Orsic, we find it revealing to hear that it was not her intention, nor the intention of the Nordics to assist them, the Germans, in their plan of genocidal domination. These beings have commonly been spoken of as benevolent race, and to hear that they were somehow involved in that situation may have been confusing for some, but those who are familiar with the interspecies contact, as depicted within the Law of One text, this may not have been much of a surprise. Now, DW. Now, when he talks about Maria Orsic, we're dealing with what he said to be Nordics. Is your understanding that Maria Orsic was in fact a Nordic here on Earth and not a human born on Earth? CG, no, my understanding was that she made contact with several groups, one of them being Nordics. DW, okay, CG, and she was the conduit for the Nordic people that they were in contact with. DW, so she may have looked like them, but she was born here. CG, yeah, every one of the people in her group, they were very beautiful. People would turn their heads if they walked. Real long hair. DW, now we've heard of the other sources that Maria Orsic was actually starting out this work doing automatic writing, and that she in fact was writing Sumerian language, and there were only 3 people on Earth who could correctly read it, and the Germans brought them in and validated the fact that that was accurate Sumerian writing. CG, and the same source that she got to the automatic writing communication from guided her in doing sketches and to look for certain ancient documents that would give them a boost in their development. TW. Now, I thought there was something interesting in there as well, which was that Maria's team only wanted these vehicles to be used for transportation. They were not wanting it to become military. That would suggest that whoever was helping her probably was not the Draco, but might have been some kind of benevolent group like these so-called Nordics. CG, right. TW, so what are your feelings on that? CG, well, it's usually what happens if a negative non-terrestrial entity makes contact with leaders of a certain group. They often, either through like they did with Maria Orsic or directly face-to-face, the benevolent group comes in and warns them, trying to give them pretty much a hippie love and peace message. Get rid of your nukes and we'll give you all this technology, extended life, travel throughout the cosmos, everything, and the military minds just couldn't accept that. I know that in William's book he describes that there were a series of people beginning in the late 1800s that were all getting telepathically contacted independently, and we're all getting this intuition for a space program. So do you think that these benevolent beings knew that the space program would be co-opted by the negative? But also, were they wise enough to see that we needed to have this for the time that we're in now, so that we could also ultimately use these tools to defeat the Draco and help kickstart us into the Ascension/Golden Age? CG, from what I heard, it seems like they were bringing balance to a situation. We were getting all of these advanced weapons of war, and we were interacting with negative forces that wanted to go out and take all over the planetary systems. So them coming in, providing technology, more of a benevolent message on how to use the technology, was their way of trying to counteract it, because the technology was not that incredibly different than what the Germans were getting from the reptilians. DW, how does it feel for you as a whistleblower who's been out there risking his life? All you have kinds of problems, all kinds of hardships and setbacks. How does it feel to see William Tompkins validate Operation High Jump? CG, it's gratifying but a little shocking too. I'm really beginning to believe that a lot of his briefings during this time, 42, were what made it into the database that I was reading on the Smart Glass pad 30 years ago. DW, right, because he said there was a stenographer that was there typing up everything that these 29 different embedded species said over the course of 1,200 briefings, and that was just the ones that Tompkins personally supervised. CG, yes, and we're viewing old typeset documents. DW, I didn't know that. Okay, so you would actually see the original typewritten paper documents? CG, yes. Well, there were redactions, but very little redacted. DW, wow. So when he said that there were unmarked craft as well as German craft, and this included a cigar-shaped craft? CG, that was new to me. I had not heard that. but I wouldn't doubt it, because if they're allied with the reptilians and we came down to an era that's mostly reptilian controlled, of course they're going to come out back up with their new ally. DW, all right. Well, this has been really fascinating. I want to thank you for watching the show. Certainly mind-blowing, as all this people say, and Corey has no validation. Well, that's what you've been seeing here as a game changer. I encourage you to tell everybody what you know, because now that we're bringing this all together, maybe a lot of people who would not have taken this seriously before are going to take a second look. Okay, this is from Cosmic Disclosure, SSP Testimonies with William Tompkins. This is from Discerning the Mystery, 2000 plus Blogspot, and it's on Out of Minds too. So tell me what you think about all this. We still don't have any evidence, of course. Okay, this is hearsay. One says this, the other says that, but we have actually no evidence. And again, my simple question is, they have not explained to us how people could survive on the moon and Mars without any food, air, proper heating, or water, clothing. They have all their fundamental needs are not there, are not met. So how can humans possibly exist on colonies on the moon and Mars? It's just not feasible. Anyway, tell me what you think about this. Thank you. I'll leave a link below for you for this on Out of Mind too. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.